Rolling sound, quiet. Here we go. 1.57. And starting right when action.
Hi, everyone. I'm R. Colin Tate. I'm an assistant professor here at TCU, so I'm broadcasting from Texas Christian University. I'm a professor of film and television. And today we're going to be talking about this amazing new film that I just saw, written and produced by Tom. Sorry, where did I? Tim. There we go. See, his name went left. Tim Sparks, Tom Muska, both producers of the movie. And I thought, without getting too spoilery or anything like that, I would get the filmmakers. Let me just adjust for lighting, etc. I would get the filmmakers to introduce the film, and then we could talk about some of the themes, some of your rationales for making the movie, etc., etc. I'm sure we'll have a very robust conversation, as this is a super pertinent movie, particularly for today. Yes. So Tim, why don't you lead us into the discussion, and we'll talk about some of the bigger picture items. Okay.
Absolutely. So Amaraica is the journey of an undocumented immigrant's kind of his the veiling of America, his American dream. He's pursuing ways to become lawful after he's come across the border unlawfully. And in the mix of all his search, he finds out that he's going to become a father, and all efforts to get his legal papers go on hold as he just tries to patch his life together and do the right thing. And then the drama unfolds from there.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, I can sort of speak from my experience, and I don't mean to give you I'm from the other side of the border. I'm originally from Canada. And, I think one of the things I always, that surprises me about immigration generally is just how little Americans actually know about the immigration system and how difficult it is to get into the country. And I don't mean to, just kind of bring myself up, but from my own experience, I think that, as a Canadian who often can walk across, you think that it's practically the same thing, but you need passports, you need paperwork, you need all of this stuff, and you need money. Mm-hmm. It seems to me like one of the biggest issues is when you cross the border. I mean, when you're from a poor rural country, these resources aren't necessarily there for people to contact lawyers, have employment at the border, all of those things, the resources that we kind of think of as, and so I just wondered if, for me, there's nothing more important than stories about the border, because this is really, especially here in Texas, I think it's such a pertinent and volatile issue right now. But I also think, there's so much of the human versus the paperwork question that mm-hmm. I think is so lost in this equation. And I really appreciated that what this story really does is gives us the human element of this equation, and insofar as we usually get this idea of just not just undocumented but illegal people. These are clearly people. And I think your movie does a remarkable job of showing these people and what drives them.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. A lot of people don't really understand the journey of legal immigration, one, and then even the black box of undocumented immigration, mm-hmm. and which is partly why I got involved and wrote and directed this. Is I literally didn't have much of an idea, but through marriage, I quickly became, trial by fire in this. And my wife happens to be from Mexico, mm-hmm. and so I kind of walked through her shoes with her as we ventured down that path. And the more that I understood and the more that I was exposed to, I really felt like making a film where someone could vicariously experience the journey that a lot of these individuals go on and go through. So, you know, getting you in the skin of a character who's done this, they're human beings. You may have a political point of view about the border one way or the other, but at the end of the day, they're human beings, and this is America. And the way they're treated, you know, ought to matter, no matter what the political point of view is. And that's why we made this film.
Mm-hmm. And it also occurs to me that, you know, what we think about as immigration has changed so much over the, you know, the course of history in this country, you know, namely, you know, for instance, when we think about the studio moguls at the beginning of the, you know, the beginning of the 20th century, you know, Mayer just basically walked over the border from Canada. Walt Disney's father just walked over the border from Canada. Like, you know, and so we have these really, I think, misconceptions about race and immigration as well, and you know, who is allowed to stay and who is, you know, who is the enemy in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And you know, with issues of borders and stuff like that, I think this is not just timely, but you know, I think what, especially as someone who, you know, came to Texas and has lived in Texas for a long time, I mean, the Hispanic population in this country is such a big part of the fabric of this nation at this point. You know, I think that legal or illegal, you know, I think just seeing more of these characters on screen is so important every possible way.
Colin, there's between 10 and 20 million undocumented workers in the United States. Mm-hmm. I did a film about the farming area in California. And, you know, we wouldn't be eating vegetables at the kind of prices we're eating if these people didn't exist. The whole economy is built around their cheap labor. And the same, what Timmy did that was so remarkable with this character is that the lead character, his life's a mess. He's confused. He's not, so many of these films take these undocumented workers and make them into little saints, that they're here and they're just wonderful people and they're just looking for the opportunity. Well, he's doing that, but he's making choices that have consequences and he pays a price for them constantly. He's not, you know, he's willing to compromise on his own values because he's discovering his own values while the film is going on. So he's a human being. You know what his feet smell like. You know what this guy is really like on the inside. You know what he would be if he had a different life. He's much like you or I. He's just dealt a very peculiar hand, and it's very interesting to watch him play that hand, and that's the beauty of the film.
Well, and you know, I think it also stands to reason that, you know, I as I look at the composition of this panel, right, as young men and perhaps young women, you know, of our ethnicity, we have opportunities to make mistakes that other people don't. Right. So, for instance, in my high school, I knew a lot of people with, you know, criminal records, right, from shoplifting and right. These are sort of seen as rites of passage for certain populations of whatever country, whereas, you know, shoplifting in the case of, you know, certain populations, and legal, illegal, undocumented, whatever you want to say, is fatal, right? This means, you know, and I think what the movie does very well is show us that these people are part of our communities. You know, I can't see a roofing company without Hispanic, right? And I'm not trying to be really, I'm just saying, like, we're always seeing these people, but we might not see them or speak to them or know what their stories are. But also, you know, that danger, right? That kind of real sense of danger that at any moment, you know, I'm not a citizen. Without my green card, if I have a busted tail, like in theory, I could be arrested or deported or, you know, all of those things. And I just can't even imagine what that fear is. And I think what's really important about this film is it gives a palpable sense of what that fear must feel like, just to be of a different ethnicity or race or religion, you know, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
How important was that for you, and how did you come to that realization?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of what we were aiming for is again to put people vicariously in these scenarios and these life situations that someone like myself, I don't think about it. It's not a part of my everyday norm. But again, having walked it, with my wife and experiencing it vicariously through her, it kind of got under my skin after a while and kind of made me feel a certain way. Um, and and um, and so we set out to kind of create these scenarios that were everyday, you know, moments that if you're a certain type of individual in this country, unfortunately, something we take for granted can be easily a moment of fear, fright, and panic that I don't think a lot of people realize.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of get back to, Tom's original point, this is really the paradox, right? This idea of we need these people and yet we persecute them simultaneously, right? And that's a really, I think, they use the term double consciousness in other sorts of conversations, but, this idea of being both needed and wanted and despised and not wanted at the same time. I think on a psychological level, we talk about trauma of just living through the COVID era and stuff like that, but I think we're very, not just to kind of say first world problems, but to think about all of the trauma that these individuals must go through and their fears and stuff. I think that is very palpable here too.
But great drama, I think, tests people's codes. Mm-hmm. And this one really tests allegiances. Does this man have allegiance to his dream? Mm-hmm. Does he have allegiance to his family? He has a child out of wedlock. Does he have allegiance to this idea? He has allegiance to his father. And that relationship gets ruptured. So right away, none of the answers are predictable. Mm-hmm. And the film pivots on him making very difficult choices and then him owning them. And I think it's brilliant because of that. And of course, it leads to the ending, which is ripped from the headlines, mm-hmm. which gives you so much more to play.
Yes, and I think that this, I don't want to spoil anything, right? But the film does deal with, the idea of child separation, which, as you mentioned earlier, and I think that it's one thing to occasionally read about it but it's an entirely different thing, even on a level of, okay, I know this is just a movie, but I also know that this is actually happening. So some of those scenes, like that final montage in the movie, or the second final montage, I guess I should say, is just heartbreaking in all sorts of ways. And I wonder, maybe you could tell me a little bit, Tim, how you constructed that, how you kind of came to the conclusion to show it so succinctly, this idea of these three intertwined characters, both the administration and the bureaucracy, and also just these human beings being dehumanized.
Mm-hmm. We when we were developing the film, mm-hmm. Literally it was at the height of the child separation issue at the border. Mm-hmm. Several years ago. And so, I'm a father, so it really, struck a chord in me. I mean, not that I'm saying I could have been that guy, but in a way, I really felt for these parents. So kind of wanted to construct a narrative where, individuals are coming here doing good, but at the same time, they're caught up being political pawns. Mm-hmm. And the idea of a child, no matter how small, even adolescent, just to be taken from their parents was just inhumane. So we constructed, and some would say in a hyper realistic scenario, but again, it was to create the aura of put yourself in their shoes. And so we just wanted, and we wanted the film to happen in the audience. So I didn't want to come up with a bad ending or a good ending, but an ending that made you think about why you may have a political point of view, or why we might want to rethink this, but let it happen in your own head as the credits roll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you've done that so effectively, and skillfully in a lot of ways, especially, not to give away the ending, but just some of the imagery that you have there as well. I think one of the things that just in terms of, for whatever reason, my phone is, I'm so sorry, is someone calling anyway. One of the things that I think is so difficult for all of us to understand is, number one, just how huge this journey is across the border, and how perilous it is. And so just even seeing the scenery of the Texas desert border for a kind of a non-Texan, and I consider myself an honorary Texan. I've been here enough, I think to see that scenery is just very daunting, first of all, and then also just so powerful, because these are just little dots on a land. These people are dots on a landscape.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that you do quite skillfully is present the stakes for these people, for people to cross the border too. So it's rarely ever is it a matter of just people wanting to cross for its own sake, right? Like as Tom said, this is for work. This is for people are in demand here, but people are also fleeing, or as is often the case with immigrants. People are looking to send money back to their homelands. Like there are so many nations that actually depend on remittances, right? So just workers sending money to their homelands, is like billions and billions and billions of dollars. So I just think it's you've done a really quite an amazing job of just giving these kind of not just multiple perspectives, but multiple rationales for why someone would come here, why someone would make this perilous journey to this country, or not so perilous even, I think this is another thing that we sometimes lose in the discussion of immigration is, oftentimes people don't necessarily want to leave their homelands, right? But there's something that brings them here. It doesn't mean that they don't love their country anymore. It's just that there's something drawing them to opportunities, for instance.
Absolutely.
And also what distinguishes the picture is within that framework, there's a romance that we can relate to that has almost nothing to do with immigration.
Yes.
It has to do with a man and a woman who happen to be Mexican undocumented workers. And that's what distinguishes the picture. The politics are in perspective to the emotional journey of the characters.
And it also seems like there are so many other opportunities where the characters interact with just everyone who interacts with the characters who's not an institutional person, like a policeman or an ICE person or something like that. As soon as you interact with a person, they're actually very humane. These interactions are very humane. And I think the other thing that your movie does quite well is this idea of, if you actually met these people, right, and these people in your movie, they're actually quite likable, no matter where you're from. And I think you've done a really quite an excellent job of presenting these different scenarios where these meanings can occur.
Yeah, thank you. In everyday life, it's like it's easy to watch media or stereotype folks, but if you're sitting at a bar and you met these characters, or real people for that matter, that you may have stereotyped, 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to find them likable and agreeable and find some common ground. And so, again, to destigmatize this issue. And another thing that I think is important in the film, we don't overdo the politics. In fact, we didn't want it to be a political film. There's no mention of any political figures or that thing, because really we wanted the story to be about a human journey that gets caught up in a particular political system and the political bureaucracies of it, but without naming that system.
Mm-hmm.
That's irrelevant. These people are human beings who get tangled, and for some would say for good reason,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time, we can't ever forget that human element, and that's the heartbeat of the movie. And yes, there's some love story in there, and as any love story, there's complications in that, and the unraveling of different relationships along the way. But I think the hero's journey in the end, whether the guy did things right or wrong or indifferent, you're rooting for him in those final moments, in those final frames. So I really hope folks take the chance to watch it and see for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing I'd like to say, you've almost summarized this. You're almost this is a good segue out of the conversation. But I think I did want to say that I think another thing I really appreciated about it was that even you demonstrate how the police are even in like swept into this as well. There's police who, there's this I think a great scene done very sensitively where suddenly it's just the police's it's the department's job to do something different, to ask people for papers. And so I think especially in kind of, as we can be very sensitive politically to almost everything at this point is a hot button issue. I think it's equally important to say that I think you were very sensitive in the portrayal of the police as well. So it's also not a like pro-immigration, anti-police or anything like that. We tend to get these binaries, but it really is like everyone is swept up in the system that I think no one is satisfied with.
Yeah,
I don't think. So
yeah.
Except we like it, the art that comes out of it, obviously, right?
Sure.
And on a positive note. But yeah, I think you've done a really remarkable job of dealing with all these complexities of what is, an almost impossibly complicated subject. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything to summarize to our audience before we go?
Well, I really appreciate the time, the Lone Star Film Festival for having us on and for streaming our film this week. And I just want to encourage anyone watching right now, take the hour-and-a-half journey with us in Amaraica. It's a film that is, if you get to the end and you're not touched or gripped by it, then you're a rare bird.
I think that's a remarkable way of putting it. So thank you, gentlemen, for your time and for making such a great movie. I really appreciate it and appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.